Hi, my name is Sio, and I'm going to take you on an adventure through some ideas from some comments I've recently received. Recently is relative here, but the ideas expressed within were fairly unique and inspired a lot of ideas in myself about the setting of Warhammer 40k, and I thought it'd be a shame to let them languish in the obscurity of my comment section. That being said, I feel like I was true to my word, and I more or less obsessively replied to all the comments on my understanding and rewriting Perturabo video, and if I didn't, I saved a lot of these replies for here. So here I'm going to give a more refined idea of the comment rather than the original one itself. And for brevity's sake, I'm probably going to cut down some of these comments and take out some of the kind words and personal details. For the former, it's because I'm a Wilton dandy and I can't handle praise, especially putting it out on there myself. And the latter, nobody asked to have their comments put here, so I'm not going to air out other people's details and interesting stuff. So thank you for sharing. I really appreciate all the likes and subs all of you people did and leaving the comments. You all know how YouTube works, and I really appreciate everything that everybody's done because it helps me get my ideas out there. So I appreciate it. Also, you, Jay Wolfie. Yeah, I'm looking at you. I saw you there. I saw you on Space Battles. You linking to my stuff. That was such a crazy thing to see somebody actually do it, making a grown man blush. It was really nice of you. Many thanks. Last thing before we get into the video proper, just a little bit of housekeeping. The next entry in the Angel Apostasy series, Perturabo, Weight of Olympia, will come out really soon. Trust me, I really wanted to rush it. I'm waiting on some art I commissioned, and I really think you're going to like it. I love it. I think it's gorgeous. It's almost entirely done, and then the video will come out as soon as I'm able. But anyway, on to the video.
Come, mortal, friend or traitor, come. Brother Urdag Oath welcomes you to this place where destiny is made, where I will be Sio's vessel with which to relay thy comments. We shall start with Der Skirld. The name sounds imperial, which is a good thing. Yeah, thank the God Emperor, it rolls off the tongue like a grox tripping over its own fat feet and not graceful and smooth like the beautiful Drukhari, disgusting Xenos names. Anyway, on to the comment. Good to see someone else wanting to see a brotherly, bonded love-hate relationship between Iron Warriors and Imperial Fists. Especially from an Iron Warriors enjoyer, since I am personally an Imperial Fists enjoyer. Though I also do like Perturabo and his Legion. Would 100% agree it's an acquired taste. I would argue it's similar for Fists, who offer an easy entry with haha fortify, but going very, very deep with defense and fortification being virtually irrelevant themes once you look deep enough into them. By the way, I believe there is a great deal of character development in Perturabo, not just inconsistent writing. In the early heresy, he starts off as pretty childish, but especially his battle against Alexis Pollux starts his transformation into a man who at the start of the Solar War is concerned with the war going too well, because he knew Dorn was easily competent enough to even fool the Alpha Legion's intel, and later being confident enough to just leave the siege, knowing he didn't need the others, but they needed him. I am also convinced he built the Iron Cage because he was convinced the rest of the traitors stood no chance without him. And I am also convinced that he hoped for a serious battle to prove himself and was pissed as fuck when Dorn just threw his forces at him without thought.
So my interaction with Dorn and his sons is similar to a lot of people's with Perturabo. I only really know him through the memes, and the fortify, it really doesn't do him any justice. So, to be fair, I've only read him in a couple parts of the Horus Heresy. I only remember him in the early books where he's given his brother Horus the old pat in the back and be like, you're the best, bro. Nothing ever bad can happen. If you're the War Master, it's fine. And then when Garo sees him on the flight of the Eisenstein, and he gets absolutely enraged. He goes like, I'm expecting from the memes this serious sort of stoic, autistic, when I say that I mean like emotionless, totally focusing on logic. Absolutely not. He is so multifaceted. That was the biggest thing that stood out to me, is that you could see it through all of his sons, which was super cool, that each one signifies and exemplified a different part of his personality, which I thought was super neat, because when he's punching in Garo's face and turning it into hamburger meat, that was so Black Templars it hurt. And I did not know if he would live or die. I didn't know the rest of the books, so I was totally ready to watch him pull out his hearts. So that was really neat. Now, to your point about Alexis Bollux, I haven't read the Solar War yet, but I'm eager to. However, through cultural osmosis, I totally get your take on how he perceived his brothers and Dorn with the Iron Cage.
Man, I just want these two guys and their legions to come together again and get along after the heresy.
No, 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 no.
I also hate when Iron Warriors are used as slaughter for fists in artwork. I think our legion should be proper antagonists, fights against each other being more akin to boss fights than slaughter.
I mean, I can't imagine any of the Loyalists' brothers do much more than tolerate their traitorous brothers, even if the Emps himself told them to forgive them. I mean, a man can hope, but, I mean, if Dorn is gonna nearly kill a man through... I might be misremembering this, I don't know if he knew who Gara was, but my fake made-up recollection is that he thought he was honorable. If he had this... general feeling towards this, hey, this is a good guy, this is the only good guy from the Death Guard, and then he, just getting a hint of him being disrespectful to his brothers, he goes and nearly murders him, there's no way in hell he'd ever be cool with Perturabo, ever. Especially after the Iron Cage. It's... no, no, no.
Hey fellow corpse worshippers, it's your boy Erdagoth back at it again with Alexander Burgess. I really enjoyed your framing of the relationship between Purdy and Gilliman, especially the detail that Macragge follows Olympian cultural trends as a nod to how Rome borrowed a lot from Greece. Personally, I would have further expounded on this by tying him to Magnus and his Egyptian theme by adding a friendly rivalry between the two of them in terms of scholarship, and elaborating on his personal feelings on Magnus's dives into the warp. Imagine a jealous streak within Purdy, that the Emperor's delving into Psychana only led to the loss of a critical memory for him, whereas with Magnus he can see no faults, a result of Magnus doing everything he can to hide the flesh change within his legion. This would then play into the Antikythera debacle, where Purdy tries to teach Magnus a lesson but also indirectly expressing his jealousy. Realizing this, he feels some small bit of guilt, which shifts and magnifies into doubt of himself and his motives by the end of the heresy, giving additional reason for him to split from the traitors. I think this would also add an extra layer of tragedy, as while he focuses on using the demon engines to harness the warp, Magnus turns to directly interfacing with it, ensuring that the already slim chance of reconciliation will never occur by writ of Tzeentch not wanting his minions stuck in a calculator or whatever else Purdy and the IW come up with.
So Alexander has some excellent ideas here. Honestly, it's one of the major reasons why I made this video in the first place. I absolutely adore them. When somebody gets the vibes that you're putting out and then is able to extend them and hit all your blind spots, just nothing feels better than that. So going through Perturabo's themes in the video I put out, Magnus and his legion and everything associated with him was almost a near total oversight for me. By the time I got to Rabute and Perturabo, Magnus had never even crossed my mind, but it is such a perfect triumvirate. It fits so well, I can't believe I missed it. If you know anything about Greek history and ancient Egyptian history, especially around the time of Alexander and going forward into the Roman Empire, the whole Ptolemaic dynasty and having all of the Cleopatra and all that jazz, it's just begging to kind of have some, especially in the sort of Perturabo Greek-Roman thing I would like to see more of. It's just begging to have something in there. Just thinking about it, it would be super cool to have near the beginning of the heresy. It doesn't have to be Magnus and Perturabo and Gilliman directly, but maybe there could be something with like some legionnaires having a weird love triangle's a weird word, but a loyalty triangle sort of thing, to where they're in this friendship. They all, maybe like it could just be psychers from all three of the legions, right? And they all have their loyalties set. And then around the time of the heresy, it's going. You could see the Iron Warriors pulling one way, and then the Ultramarines pulling the Thousand Suns the other way, and it's this really messy thing. And then I think there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. I know it's silly, but it could also go down the lines where the way I imagine the planets were terraformed to resemble Earth's myths and all that stuff, and sort of keeping the genetic human history, spread out throughout the galaxy. So this reply is going to be way more scatterbrained and jumping around. But going specifically to Perturabo's resentment, like internal, small, festering resentment towards Magnus for the sort of the psychic gifts that he got from the Emperor, that it went being damaged to Perturabo, and see Perturabo seeing Magnus as being like, in one facet of reality, a gigantic, like, demigod among demigods, for the warp and everything. Also kind of conveniently ignoring the fact that in the physical realm, he's more like a Satan, to where he has like actually they're both sides of the coin, right? One has an almost total mastery of the Immaterium in terms of being one of the strongest psychics in the universe, to where the other, everything unravels itself in Perturabo's mind in the physical realm. So it's a really nice balance, sort of coins. Anyway, that resentment that Perturabo would have towards Magnus, resulting in pride and shame on Magnus's part, it's just gold, right? The failure in communication between even two of the closest friends is so common in real life it hurts. Hell, half of the reason I do any of this is because when I read a story like this, I sit there staring off into space for like an hour. The book doesn't get read, I get sleepy, and I'm just daydreaming about what could have been if people had talked more, if a certain line was said that made a different line of questioning go out, and then all of these mixed messages were solved, and like how glorious and happy things can turn out instead of the usual tragedy and misery that is inherent to life and struggle. Alright, switching gears to speaking towards your point about the Antikythera. Anything to make Perturabo feel like shit for betraying the Imperium after the fact is like icing on the cake for me. I can imagine him pondering about how much better and how much more it would have helped the Imperium if he and Magnus had brought it to the Emperor together. Having found a method to sidestep the need for navigators and getting one step closer to making warp travel easier. I mean, I know it's no warp gateway or whatever, but, anything to make that whole dangerous process easier is, I can see him running the math and being like, oh, we could have had a 20% greater chance, probably at best, but still. With this shift, I wonder how the Council of Nicaea would play out. I didn't mention it in the video, but I always thought it was strange that Perturabo didn't join Morton's objection to Psychers. I don't know, it might just be me, I don't know. But, I would think the ever-present Ayaterra just kind of staring down at him constantly, giving him anxiety and stress and the like, that would put him squarely against it, alongside his, previous advice to Magnus about trusting the wisdom of his father, who knows more and who has seen more than him. So if his father's like, maybe we should ban Psychers, for political reasons or not, they can be some trouble, he might take that into consideration. Then again, by this point, maybe his trust in his father's waned a little bit. And I could see him being totally conflicted on his, belief in his father and wanting to side by his friend. Maybe he was actually doing his close brother Magnus a favor by not speaking up. And he could have been torn on what side of the argument he wanted to be. Once again, his logical mind versus his human heart. Maybe by not speaking up, that's him actively going and helping Magnus out, right? Maybe we could see it from his point of view. Like, if he doesn't say anything, he's not technically lying or attacking Magnus. So in his mind, he's doing him a favor. Because, I can't logically and fairly totally support your argument, and anything I say might be a death nail to your case, and I don't want to do that. And at the same time, I could see Magnus being totally hurt, feeling betrayed by his brother not speaking up for him, because Magnus is our special, sensitive little boy, and he needs to be taken care of and coddled.
That's an excellent point. I feel like Purdy, the pragmatist that he is, would side with Magnus in terms of the librarians. Given his theme as a teacher, he would hold scholarship to a high standard and would recognize the tyrant's trend of doing away with it to impose security with his many years living with a despot. However, I disagree that his opinion may have been eroded by then, at least not completely. I'd argue he still believed that his father was a benevolent leader, but was still subject to error in some regards. But he believed the emperor would continue to allow the study of Psychana, just with certain regulations in place to check the worst it had to offer. Once he was proved wrong, however, it showed him that his father is truly a tyrant. It was more than just the Crimson King who was turned from the emperor's light at Nicaea. This narrative would further reinforce the theme of a Greek tragedy, in that the emperor fell short of Purdy's high expectations, and that through the simple decision of inaction, yet another nail was placed in the coffin, so to speak. I really like the idea of looking at Primarchs in different ways and dissecting them.
The weaving of themes throughout this is just a chef's kiss. I really like the idea of Perturabo logically working out that the warp is just another facet of the greater universe, if not reality itself, and that its properties, ever shifting as they are, need to be studied and understood the best we can. All the while, his baser nature, the human part of him that reflexively recoils upon seeing the Eye of Terror, it pulls at him, leaving him understandably sympathetic with the impulse to exile and shun it as abhorrent and unnatural. Thinking about it a bit more, I can see the Eye of Terror being more of a feature rather than a bug. A mind such as Perturabo's would probably break at reality just not working, unless it had some sort of constant frame of reference, that the laws that preside over all the universe can be broken at times. He is a creature of the materium, and not constantly, but, frequently enough, all those rules break, right? So either he crashes or the bits overflow, and I think that is the device with which the bits will roll over, so to speak. Also, he doesn't know I'm plugging it here, but subscribe to his Twitter, Victor Faust VA. He's gonna come out with some stuff, I think, maybe one day. I don't know, he does things. It's pretty good. I'd sub to it. Links in the description.
I would strongly advise against changing the channel at this juncture in our relationship. I have difficulties with abandonment.
Now it's time for the Pizza Head Show.
Hey everybody, I'm done trick-or-treating and now I'm gonna go for a stuffed crust pizza at Pizza Hut. Yay!
Not yet, Pizza Head. There's one more place to go.
I don't think anyone's home.
Sure there is.
Whoa, trick-or-treat! Interesting hieroglyphics on this pizza. Ah!
Quick, Pizza Head, let's go upstairs.
Hey, who lives here anyway?
It's your host, Count Steve.
Oh, nice place. You got it. Ah! I wanna go to Pizza Hut now!
The Count will be happy to give you a lift.
Oh, hey, put me down! Put me down!
See you next time.
Boo!
It's good to be back. It's like underwear straight from the dryer.
Welcome back. Our next comment is from, wait, was that an Ed, Edd and Eddy bumper with a commercial? The video is already like an hour long. I don't care how tired you are when you're editing, that's unnecessary. Whatever, the next comment better be worth it. Let's see, it's from Chubby Solaire, eater of pussy. Seriously, God, Emperor, damn it. It was super cool when he said, I am Peter Turbo, turbo within, turbo without, and started going really fast.
It is one of the most underrated scenes in the entire heresy, but the blue chili dog stained t-shirt they had him wear took me out of the scene a little bit.
Yeah, that checked out. I'm not even surprised. The sooner we move on to the Sook and Destroy one, the better. So here we go. Can we have a classic Greek prophesy to kill the father and fighting against this prophecy only to make it happen? Also, what I'd do is have Purdy actually fail to act when the snake is attacking the kid, being too caught in the moment and his conflicting ideals. This would later torture his mind and be part of why he turns. My inaction doomed that boy on that fateful day. Logic dictated it was folly to engage the beast in an outright fight. My soul screamed for me to act, but I could choose neither. I now stand at the crossroads of the death of the Imperium, and all I see are serpents. I'd make decimation and the razing of enemy settlements and citizens commonplace on the world he came from.
Now, I do love some horrifying Oedipal tragedy, so if you make that come from a psyker, the whole prophecy thing, I'm in. Now, your point on decimation would make it far less jarring. especially if someone like Miltiades, who he's kind of like stuck to for a certain amount of time when he first gets there, shows some virtue in it. Then it would feel far less jarring and like, what the hell are you doing, when he finally does it after he like only recently connects to his legion, and he's like, this is my legion, this is my culture, I'm gonna run it the way I want, and you can all screw off, doesn't matter. Now, your point on memory, however, I don't even think that would do it for me. It still seems superfluous to his character. Something like a short fuse between motivations and a near demigod like Perturabo seems out of place for a Gigabrain like him or any of his other brothers.
I find it interesting how Perturabo makes a statue that is absolutely technically perfect, but the piece doesn't say anything, doesn't mean anything. While the other man's statue was basically perfect, but had such artisan skill and care put into it that it not only was technically perfect, but elevated spiritually in a way too.
Honestly, even if I really don't like that characterization and the Perturabo that makes, it's a wonderful story in general, and I think it really does build up an interesting sort of villain, a challenged villain. If he were to be fully petulant, mechanical, and flawed, maybe the least a human of the Primarchs, like a Negavulcan, I could see this being his defining story. He could be better than the humans in a million ways, but in this one, he would always be lesser. I can see Ferris always looking at him, looking down for him for that, but the Iron Hands always secretly, they're not going to tell their Primarch, but they always secretly in their hearts look up to Perturabo and kind of see him as they have to, like, before the fall, ooh, that'd be interesting. Before the fall, there's a lot of people who are in their things that they try to push Ferris to be like Perturabo in that way and to be more mechanical, and Ferris is just like, no, we are humans at the end of the day, and these mechanical hands are a means to an end. And then when the heresy happens, that they go and there's like a sub-faction, right? That could be one of their greater shames, that the most virulently like mechanical, like the kind of like the Dark Mechanicum, a lot of them go and seek out, or at least even just a small faction, go seek out the Iron Warriors to go be a part of them, to where the other ones who are also mechanically inclined, kind of in very similar ways to the Dark Angels, actively hate them more than anything. Like they're turning the tenets on their head to be like, no, we're with Ferris, who agreed with us, even though they're totally wrong and deluded. But that would be just a real interesting dynamic. Negavulcan, I love it.
Negavulcan? I'm pretty sure that's their word, but whatever, it's your channel. While it's still up, let's move on to Josh Robbins' comment. Thing is, I can see the decimation still being in character, but I would have it happen later in his career rather than right at the start. Instead, make it so that the moment it happens, it's basically the start of when he's slipping down the path of heresy/traitor, and more or less becomes the moment Perturabo snaps, so to speak, or at least the beginning of the end for him as a loyalist.
I can see this working for him. I can see it be huge for him, and I think it would work as a shift in his character, especially if he was warmer to his men, kind of like when he's after he beats the crap out of Fulgrim and he asks his son what's wrong. If he's like that, but with all of his men, he actually takes stock of each one, it would be really interesting to see him get colder and colder to them, like other Primarchs who don't care and just see them as disposable units, as tools, right? But the problem here is Angron. He decimates his legion so often that it kind of takes away the shocking aspect to Perturabo doing it. I mean, like, to be fair, if we see him as a man who values his men as tools, you know, in one aspect and never wastes them, a right tool for a purpose that can only be used to its breaking point when it needs to be, showing him frivolously culling them by a 10th would be a great turning point, especially if it was his way of clearing out the most of the loyalists. I think his characterization would need a bit of adjustments for it to work, though. It's still a really good idea.
Ooh, finally a little friction with Scott Gleason in this next one. It has all been too kind for such a grim, dark realm. Perturabo's weakness is his refusal to understand human interaction outside of violence. He can no-sell Demon Prince Angron, but at the first mention of politics, he has a psychotic break. Vulcan would be his opposite, but he only sees Rogel doing the same job for more reward. Also, is it possible that Peter Turbo attempted to absorb memories from a Drukhari raiding party, and the resulting drug overdose gave him memory loss and paranoia? Just thinking.
See, the problem with that is that we see him try to interact with people when he first encounters the Shepherd as a boy. We see him also interact very concerned in a very human way with his son after beating off Fulgrim in his tent. Now, in regards to the Dark Elves, we don't use those dirty words around here. I have no idea what you're talking about, but it sounds pretty sweet. Although I'm not sure there are any Dark Elves around Olympia or any warp gates. That being said, I refuse to look at those sluts' maps. So, you know, there might be, who knows.
What the hell, man? The casual space racism I can abide by, but such prudishness at the fine erotic arts of map-making is astonishing. Even a simple fellow god emperor fearing Imperial should be able to see its beauty beyond the protrusions it evokes. For the moment, I can't even look at you. How ironic that the IS 187 is up next. That image reminded me of my friend Pat Roach, who played Hephaestus in the original Clash of the Titans, except he made the Golden Owl Bobo D. Hephaestus is who I think Perturabo is based on. Lord of the Forge, father of technology and invention, broken one, creation and repair, hammer and measure, excerpts from a Hephaestus poster. He's from Greek mythology, but his Roman counterpart is Vulcan. Speaking of Vulcans XD, people often associate logical thought with coldness, and it's not, it's just logic. People should take their warm heart-felt emotions, suck a big one, and stop letting it cloud their judgment to the best courses of action. Again, thinking of said Vulcan, in regards to the decimation in order to improve his legion, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. XD Perturabo has the sickest 30K model of all the Primarchs.
Rest in peace, Pat Roach, killer actor, man who terrified me as a child by his death in Raiders. I never wanted to go near a plane, ever. I knew those blades were going to get me. I don't care. But I very much want to see Perturabo as Hephaestus, and I don't understand why they don't lean into it more by making him cripple. It would set him apart and make the big, bulky armor he wears feel more fitting. Honestly, when I first saw that like big square armor he had when I first got introduced to 40K, I assumed there was some reason why his armor, I didn't think it was just big Terminator. I thought there must have been something underneath that made it that way. Nope. He's just a giant nerd. Also, they can go for a mega mind with with a crippled body sort of thing. I think that'd also be kind of fun, Now, also, I assume they didn't because, as you say, we have Vulcan, but why go for the Greek crafter on Olympia if you're not going to do anything with it? With stuff like this, you think they didn't plan it out or something. Now, about that model, hell yeah, I totally agree. The model is only challenged by Sanguinius and Ferris, as they both have such really dynamic poses. Now, on that topic, the lion's is shamefully chunky, and its proportions show something I've always had a mental sort of problem with both the lion's thing and just Space Marines in general. It's so thick, his armor that is, that I have a hard time envisioning him actually moving around with it and swinging his sword. Maybe I just don't have a very active imagination, but like him actually doing anything with that giant two-handed sword, which would be super cool, just doesn't work. This might be controversial. I know it is controversial. That's one of the interesting things I think about the Primaris is that the proportions, at least in the art, if you're taking it for what it is, I feel like they can swing a two-handed power sword without it looking like doing it in my brain, right? But I would think I have an active imagination. I can close my eyes and rotate a cow. Now do it with me. Close your eyes. Now look at the cow. Rotate it. Moo. Watch the milk fly off in zero gravity. It gets weird. Anyway, moving on.
If disrespecting our God Emperor's perfect design patterns for his angels were not heresy enough, you had the audacity to conjure things with your mind? Heresy of the foulest order. A kill team has been sent to your house as well as to the homes of everyone watching this. Do not turn it off. Your IPs have already been logged. In the meantime, let's enjoy the next comment by Mehdi while we wait. It hurts to see how a lot of authors don't respect his character, but I love how you rewrote him, as it makes a lot more sense to me. I'm wondering how you think he would feel now in the current 40K setting. What do you think he's thinking, or how he feels? Do you think he misses Magnus and his brothers?
First, Mehdi, thank you for sharing your comment with me. I really appreciate it. To get to your point, I think it would just reinforce his feelings and justifications for turning traitor in the first place. Obviously, the Emperor's vision was a failure from the start. I mean, look at the degenerate creatures he had leading in major roles in the Imperium. I mean, he entrusted them, and look at what happened to them and the Imperium in turn. And look at that in relation to the one of the few Primarchs who he feels, not naming names, that he feels was looked over. One that, when Nurgle came a-knockin', he was able to push it away and turn it aside and stay solid and whole and not give in to temptation, unlike his other bald brothers. I mean, he sits there, uncorrupted, untempted, with no recognition, and is able to easily dismantle everything his father has done. I can see somebody as prideful as him definitely feeling totally justified.
I especially agree with your opinion on how he feels on his traitor brothers. I think he feels sorrow to an extent that Magnus fell the way he did. He tried to warn him that looking too deep into the warp would not have a good outcome, yet he didn't heed his warning, and look what became of him. Sure, you can say Magnus was forced to, but Magnus's fall is a whole can of worms, lol. But how do you think he feels about his loyalist brothers? Do you think after years of being able to rethink his actions that he regrets choosing the side that he did, or would that cold logic keep such thoughts in his subconscious? I believe he does to a certain extent, but I would love to hear what you think.
I think that's a great question. And, my first gut reaction is that I think he'd be embittered by the whole affair. Really, everyone who sided against him, he probably thought they all had it better, and seeing him in this sort of bitter point of view, it's like, oh, they sided with my dad against me, everybody's against me, obviously they all suck, why wouldn't they, and just kind of like taking his stuff and going and building his own demon little planet and whatever, and just be really just unpleasant about it. But if we think about it a bit more and don't really fall into the meme of it all, I think it'd probably be compartmentalized on a brother-by-brother basis and really depend on the time difference between, his fall and the Siege of Terra and how long it's been. And I think that because, if normal people, if we feel like we've been hard done by, it's very easy for us to do things that we would otherwise think of as amoral or immoral in a sort of feeling of retaliation. And we could make a bunch of justifications for it that don't entirely flow with any sort of direct logical stream, because if we did, we'd kind of have to face up to that, and it would, break us, because then we'd see ourselves as, not being in the good, and most people want to see themselves as being in the good. Anyway, so going from a brother by brother, I think, at a certain point, he'd probably early on lament the fall of Vulcan for, if nothing else, his creative spark. Probably over time that would probably wane, and I think maybe with the way the warp messes with your brain, you'd probably turn that concern and love for the creative spark. If we want to keep the Andos sort of story as canon, in that it might kind of turn into that bitter, instead of admiration for someone of equal status and stature in terms of a craftsman, it might turn to this bitter sort of jealousy. For the Lion, he might, that's always kind of been ambiguous, right? Especially near the end, when he goes and, quote unquote, tricks him into getting the engines. Seeing the Lion back now, maybe that was an earnest feeling of the Lion's, but we'll never know how Perturabo felt. He's like, oh, finally, my brother, maybe the Lion was being pragmatic and sort of trying to shear up his, a base for his bid as War Master, but maybe he really did see the value in his brother. And honestly, if anybody could look past his autistic exterior, it would be, the Lion would see Perturabo's true value as a sort of utilitarian, which the Lion always came off to as me. But anyway, that's a mystery, and I can't imagine that would be nurtured over, 10,000 years. I mean, maybe the nugget there, but I can't imagine much more. Then you have others like Gulliman or Korax. I'd imagine he'd have contempt for all of them, for sticking with their father, and, resentful jealousy about having relatively caring parents. And that would just kind of all build up into these sort of different sort of strains of tortured logic, and then there's others like the Khan, where what about him? Maybe the Khan may have seemed arrogant and treated him like he treated Mortarion, and just kind of dismissive and meh. So, not good, long and short, for all of the Loyalist brothers.
All this talk about the Primarchs has me thinking, if only a Primarch could kill another Primarch, do we really want them to come back? It seems like any loyalist should be praying they stay away, far away, so that they can continue to help humanity from the shadows and the human race, and any other benevolent, slow-breeding races out there can retake the galaxy. Just food for thought before we get into Nostrum and Praetor's comment. Perturabo skill-diffing Angron by zoning him out is the coolest shit I ever saw from him.
Easily. Like, it's one of the coolest things that any Primarch has done ever. And the fact that it's against not just another Primarch, but a Daemon Primarch, it's just so, it's choice. I mean, not only is it the coolest shit ever, but it doesn't even feel like Angron is jobbing. It feels like Angron, it feels he's very real, and he's a very dangerous threat. But Pert's prep time out Batman's even the Night Haunter just by destroying him. Those depictions of Angron's axe biting through his thick armor were so juicy, the memory makes me want to reread it again right now. I wrote this comment, like this little message to this comment a little while ago, and rereading it for the video now, I want to reread it again. That's how good it is. Mwah.
Our next comment comes from Joshua Shoemaker, who asks our fellow loyal Imperials to be more skeptical of stories we have been told. While this is heretical, especially in regards to the Emperor's traitorous sons, it did get my noggin a-joggin'. What if the fall of the Elder and the birth of She Who Thirsts was not put at the feet of the Elder, but instead a sinister plot from malevolent forces elsewhere? All the while, the innocent Eldar have been propagandized to by the followers of Sigarak as a joke. They've done worse. Think about it. The Remembrances got a twisted story from the grandson's sculptor. Perturabo destroyed his own sculpture because it was going to be used as a form of mockery. Or it was destroyed by the grandfather because he lost and didn't want it to be shown that his human skills were nothing compared to the Primarch due to the fact he wasn't a true Olympian. Perturabo watched and did nothing. As the day rose, the people came and noticed only he sitting at the foot of the broken statues and thought he had done it. He didn't defend himself, for they didn't ask if it was his doing, but assumed he did it.
That's a really interesting alternate take. I think the story works really well as the, Perturabo is shitty and terrible, and this is kind of like the flagstone story for that, if we're going in that direction. This, if he's not shitty, is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sort of explanation for that. Like, it's all just, that kind of bias. It's, sort of, not just bias, but unreliable narrator. People give J.R.R. Martin a lot of crap, and rightfully so in some cases. But one thing I really do enjoy about it is sort of a lot of the fan theories and reading between the lines sort of things. Whether or not that is anything, or it's a very Kubo Bleach ass pull, like going through all of your old chapters being like, what are all the loose ends that I could tie back in? Oh my god, those are so fun. Anyway, going off on your take, I love an alt universe where Perturabo is just super unlucky. Like, he's a normal kid at school who doesn't really have anything outwardly going for him to make him super stand out, but he's just unlucky enough to have a rumor started about him. And because he's nondescript otherwise, that's what people associate in their head with. Like, oh, he's that rumor kid because it's so, out there. And that's only the thing that people associate him with. So like even his brothers treat him like that because no one but Horus is willing to get to know him, and then he uses that against him and plays his brothers against each other. I think it would be neat. And also, I have a history for kind of being a sucker in books for just kind of buying what people have to say on face value. Like, oh yeah, sure, he's got 1.5 million motives to lie, but I'm not thinking about those right now. It's this. Like, it's got to be straightforward. I got screwed so many times with like twists and turns that now I'm almost the exact opposite, to where I'm constantly suspicious about everybody's motive. I'm like, what does he have to hide? What are you doing? Hey, what are you doing? So dumb, but I mean, back to George R. R. Martin, I think the Song of Ice and Fire, that broke me. Like, that really broke me going into all the theories. Like, I was like, oh, there's so much going on. And that level of, intentional or not, my dream is to kind of have, to put enough thought into a story and its effects on the world around it and the people who are also just living their own lives and who are the main characters of their own stories living, that all of the sort of physics of things bouncing off each other just happen. And it seems random, but like everything kind of logically makes sense. That's my one-day dream, to make something as cool as that. You know, and video games are the same, but the Mandalorian's video on Marathon and other things like that have got me feeling the same way now. Oh, one last note about this comment, though. Also, Pert is definitely the type of guy to take the rap for something just because he didn't verbally argue otherwise and just kind of be resentful and bitter. And you guys like that in high school? I'm like, why didn't you fight for your innocence? He's like, man, I don't know. Like, all right, dude. It almost feels like they want a justification for feeling bad, and that probably stems from all sorts of manner of being abused in other ways and having this kind of victim complex that's not entirely unjustified, but it's sad. Pert Rabo's sad, and it's great.
Not sorry. What in the God Emperor's name does a Primarch, a literal son of a god, have to be sorry or mopey about? He didn't even have a broken brain like Conrad or Angryman. They are traitors, and as a warrior of the Emperor, I reserve the right to be rude about their names. Now on to Ursine Canine's comment. 21.
I've seen this a few times, and I thought it was kind of strange. So you have the 18 official sons, 9 that stayed loyal, and the 9 that were less loyal. Omegon, 19, and then the 2 unpersoned Primarchs in the 2nd, the 11th Legion, that's 21. However, I'm not crazy here. I think there's potentially 22 Primarchs in that. Now, there's a 3rd Alfarius, Omegon, and some weird Thagon triplet to the Hydra. The Hydra has 3 heads. Okay, it's not. Other people agree with me. Okay, it's not just nearly porn artists who draw scantily clad female Primarchs. I've seen this around. I'm not Conrad brained. You're Conrad brained. There's 3. 22. 22 is my official stance.
By the Emperor, he is breaking. He must have the warp madness. If the kill team doesn't get him first, I may have to. Until then, let's move on to 40K Anon. Oh shit, you included my draw thread delivery at 2012, fucking legend. Come on, dig the bloody trench.
Hell yeah, brother. But you know what? I have an issue with you. 40K Anon, if that is your real name, which I'm assuming it is. There's no link on your page. I'm looking around. I don't see any images. I don't see any things. Shill your in my threads. I don't care. Post your art. I want to see it. Gimme your art. I want to see your art. I want to feed on it. Just give me sustenance. F***ing art vampire.
Now that was a bit gratuitous. How would you feel if Saint Celestine heard you say that, I didn't think so. Hopefully the next comment will calm you down. Wait. It's from Carnes? Oh. All the Primarchs were flawed and failed jab projects. They only existed to serve a purpose, and when that purpose was fulfilled, All Primarchs and R-states would get the Thunder Warrior treatment.
I don't know. I like the idea of the Emperor having them all chill in stasis until mankind needs them most. Then the demigods shall walk amongst the galaxy once more, or something crazy like that. I think it'd be neat. And also, the Karn traveling around on the outskirts of the galaxy is an early warning system for humanity dealing with things like, I don't know, the Tyranids would be really kick-ass. So, that's my fun little fan theory. I don't like to think of the Emperor as being that evil, definitely a guy willing to sacrifice 3/4, all but like a fifth of humanity, just so it can prosper in the long run, but not so much as I'll let all but one of humanity fall so I can become a god. I don't That's my position on it, articulated to its fullest.
Heresy and devolving to gibbering sounds of a chaos spawn. How the moderate have fallen. I'm going to move on to Robert Simmons and try to forget about it. If you want to twist the tragedy knife, have him remember his family as he gets informed a loyalist legion has decimated the home he helped them build, only to realize at Terra that it was someone like Lorgar or Fulgrim. The abandoning the siege would be so much more impactful if he realizes he's been aiding his family's killers.
Oh god, that is incredibly tragic. I love it. It's so juicy. I think more subterfuge is missing from Horus and the like to get their brothers to turn. Fulgrim and Perturabo could really have used some more. Magnus had some, but god, it's dumb. It's just terrible. And, I can really see Perturabo getting it, like just finally realizing it. Let's assume that he didn't have a shitty relationship with his family. Or not entirely, or his relationship with Caliphone, whatever her name is, was a lot better. Then, when he finally does it, if somehow something had made him kill them, then him totally feel betrayed and isolated. And then being screwing off alone, and then just kind of being, hating everything, really everything. And see, that might be the only time where I really could get into the fifth Chaos God, not the Emperor, but not Maleficent, Malice. There it is. Malice being the fifth one, and then being a demon Primarch of Malice. I think, if I recall correctly. That would be cool, because then he's just spiteful and everything. And then might make his themes of just being a spiteful jerk more fitting, in some cases, if you can really kind of like adjust the knobs on some of the stories, then because it's just kind of like, it all comes from this place of sorrow, true, just like gut-wrenching, I can't believe I was the one to kill my family. It's all because of me.
Much has been said about the elves' penchant for suffering, in both the extracting and enjoyment therein, but I have to imagine they don't talk about it as much. It's a bit grim, dark, even. Maybe Gabriel Blackwell's comment will be better. 5646, that image is just cursed.
Oh, good lord, I know. I hate looking at it. I do everything I can to remove it from the screen, but, I can't right now. My keys aren't working, and I'm trying to, let me try to hack into something. Hold on. Let me see if maybe I can get another keyboard to really try to hack into. There we go. Let me lost a key there. That might take me a minute before I can get this thing off the screen, because, I'm trying, 1 minute. Let me get into YouTube and hack into that. Done. Sorry about that. Won't happen again.
I will not sanction this buffoonery with a response, and will just move on to Luca Clifford. I think you've got pert down RLY well, but regarding the rewrite bits, I disagree with the Amnesia and Maclador's esoteric shenanigans, unless those shenanigans can actually be justified as good decisions but seen by Perturabo without sufficient context or explanation to justify the logic he isn't seeing. The amnesia, while given a tragic spin in your retelling, still feels like a convenient way to make his fall easier. I feel he should have those memories, and they should help shape his relationships with his brothers, and perhaps influence his philosophy, adding a sense of unity to it.
I agree 100%. The amnesia is arbitrary and takes away from his characterization without adding anything. It's like a bad retcon. The way I had it in the video was to make it work, just within the context of the story, but if I had my choice, entirety of editorial powers, I'd nix it entirely. The Malk point and the one about his family is solid. I totally agree.
Building on the role you give Horace in Pier's turn, I think Pert should have a disdain for various flaws he sees in imperial bureaucracy that, at least in some cases, Horace has secretly had a hand in, but openly should be working with Perturabo to try and fix them, and this should be the method Horace uses in the Emperor's absence to build Pert's resentment of the imperial bureaucracy, which can then easily be laid at the Emperor's feet, and with the burning of Prospero, could culminate in Pert feeling that the Imperium is falling apart due to the Emperor's apparent negligence on Terra. And during this dissolution is when Pert joins Horace with the ideal of making a stronger Imperium for the sake of the people, only realizing, like every other traitor, far too late how wrong he was.
Oh my god, chef's kiss. Mwah, my man, this is fantastic. I love it. It just hits so right and gives Horace a big hand in Pert's fall, while making Pert's fall feel logical, and his, out of all the other Primarchs, needs to feel logical. You know, damning himself with righteous permission of his own conscience feels right for him. His arrogance and pride is used to hand-wave away too much in the main timeline, but this is directly useful to the plot. Here, it's a totally reasonable justification that he would make to trust Horace and the data he presents, while he's also allowing his pride and bias to follow through with the logic, while both not going out of his way to get extra data from the horse's mouth, and tragically ignoring his own advice to Magnus in trusting the Emperor's long game. Hell, the burning of Prospero would be an emotionally driven reason for what he does, which would totally go against his otherwise logical view of the world, and kind of this slip up in going away from both his advice and his worldview, would be perfect. And I think it would actually also fit into like the ironic nature of Perturabo, to where where all the Primarchs, I've seen some comments about the hypocrisy being essential to Primarchs. This, where it's not the Emperor's fault, but Horace's own personal failings and not being able to live up to his own standards. Oh god, that would just be so killer.
This would make his fall a case of manipulation and good intentions leading him to damnation.
Oh, for sure. I think the more Horace has a hand directly in the fall of each of his brothers, the better. If he's going to be the arch-traitor, make him the arch-traitor. He feels like it's only that in name only, and because he's the biggest stick that Chaos has to, smack the Imperium with. Thinking about it more, honestly, Erebus has too big a hand in the heresy. I think it would be more interesting if Erebus and Corphoron helped to light the spark of Lorgar, and he went off to surpass their machinations way beyond anything they would be capable of. As it stands, it feels like he only does so in terms of raw power, and where he should be like the ultimate manipulator, kind of like a Loki figure. I'll save that for another video. But, he feels like on par with Erebus and Corphoron, and it needs to be something, because he really does, he never gets beyond the runt of the litter, and that might be okay, sort of like secretly, like there's some part of him thematically that is always there, but it feels like he's just always like the little brother trying to tag along. And when Horace, when he tries to use Fulgrim to go up to Horace and uses him to attack him to usurp the War Master, and he just beats his ass easily, that was, God, it was pathetic. And I mean, I get it, you kind of want him to be pathetic, but it feels like there should be the epic way for that to happen, instead of like it felt like it resolved so quickly. It wasn't that satisfying.
I think all of the Primarchs should be firm loyalists and almost ideal versions of themselves before gradually being brought down. And while everyone is feeling the Emperor's absence and the influence of Horus, half of the brothers side with Horus out of noble intentions or otherwise will-written falls from grace, only to become the monsters they are in 40K during or after the heresy.
Man, I dig it. Dig it! It really lends itself to like an Age of Heroes sort of thing, which is what 30K I thought was supposed to be. Like where demigods strode among the galaxy, where they were better than us in every way, to where it feels like it undercuts that by making them flawed from the beginning. And that just doesn't feel right. The Daemons came out way too early. Imagine something like if their fall could be seen from a more noble cause, where Horus turns all but the most loyal specifically to the Emperor, to his side, with a brighter, albeit more naive vision. Then it would strain our disbelief less. Maybe he could be arguing for greater equality or democracy or something that obviously wouldn't work on a galaxy-wide scale, but feeds into an individual's hope for a better tomorrow, instead of one where you're a cog in the machine that's working for the species, but, you know, you can't really see it from, you know, unless you're like 20,000 feet up. In this way, he and Lorgar can really bog the argument down in philosophical discussions, and, you know, also for the average sort of human, and space marine when they're just talking and, you know, spreading all the propaganda, to where sophist seeds of chaos could be snuck in to their arguments, right? Little by little. It could start as a pure age of myth, each side fighting for our cause, propaganda going wild. Honestly, there needs to be more propaganda just everywhere. I think that you have a lot of it. It's really great in the Gene Stealer cults, but if we can get even more of that, like in the Horus Heresy, that would actually also make the Inquisition and the constant barrage of Imperial propaganda feel like it's fitting more, right? Like it's some overdone response, immune response to chaos, which it kind of is now, but if we have something like something for it to oppose, it would feel better. Because in like we get the idea that it's kind of happening, but something like in our face, more like that we would believe an average person would fall in with, that would be, well, perfect. I mean, think about the propaganda on a planetary scale, where you have some which are taking on the brunt of the Imperium's workload, and then they see Horus as a beacon to kind of throw off those shackles and to kind of be more free, and for everyone there to have a better standard of living, not understanding what they're kind of suffering for. You know, instead of looking more and more corrupt from the very beginning, the powers of chaos mirror his Horus's main charisma, to be a lot like the Emperor's in its strength and his like radiance as a holy beacon. It really felt unbelievable that all of these different planets would just kind of fall to their side. I mean, sure, you're going to get a lot of them in terms of force and selfishness, but it seems like it'd be more Chaos's way to really kind of, oh, I see what you did there, Anathema. We'll beat you at your own game sort of thing. And then from there, we have the demons don't show up until the very end. By the time they've ground their troops all the way to Terra, and Horus has been beaten up and he's injured, and the more that's happening, they're eating away at him, consuming him by chaos. This in turn is relatively like gradual, right, but rapidly declines in the last few days in the Siege of Terra. That level of madness to where he's like, oh my god, I thought I was on the good side, Perturabo would be looking, and this is way too much. There's demons everywhere. Horus turned, I was setting up this entire siege, and then I turn around and now Horus is like, his skin's all pale. One of my brothers is a snake. You know, the other one's this giant red monstrosity, and one's crying in the corner. I don't know what's happening. I'm outie. Like, it'd be perfect.
I also hate the idea of placing blame at illogically written decisions by the Emperor, as they also just smack of plot convenience. The fall of each Primarch should not in any way be built off flaws designed to give them an excuse to turn traitor. The Emperor or Maclador should not be turned into uncaring, plotting, scheming, or incomputable assholes just to give Primarchs the bad dad or all according to plan excuses.
I totally agree. You can make these nigh immortal, ancient, powerful men still get pushed against the ropes for totally logical reasons that don't involve ass pulls or hand waves. Thank you so much for the comment. It's lovely. It got my juices flowing. Mwah, it's just solid. I live for comments like this.
I think I can speak for the entire Imperium when I say no one wants to hear mouth noises and you talk about your juices. It reminds me of a certain... No! Not this heresy! When he gets brought up, any loyal son of the Gorgon suffers from the Ferris fits. Ah!
Being a pirate is a rented thing. Do what you want, 'cause a pirate is free. You are a pirate.
I'm back. Such horrible sights. Why are my hands sticky? Just go on to Mega Kaioken's comment. I need to cleanse myself. The way you pronounce curs gives me the same feeling I got when I first saw the Cool Whip bit on Family Guy.
My secret is that I hope I'm aggravating enough that the warp opens itself up and Big Titty Goth Cruz shuts me up herself. That or I'm a dyslexic in denial, but that's less fun.
These responses have become far too degenerate. There is not enough promethium in the sector to purify this filth. At least Alistair's comment should be as chaste as the Emperor wills us to be. I need female Conrad in my life.
You're a braver man than I. I can just imagine it going like this.
Oh, Alistair, dear. I heard some ever so disturbing news about your parents. I'm going to need to take an inch of foreskin for every month they stole cable in 1994.
Me, visibly scare-roused. Is that it, At this point, I think CEO is courting this, if not outright infecting the poor viewers with this chaotic taint. Now, is that all the filth? I can't imagine there is anything worse left, least of all from Umbral. Here is how you solve the Primarch issues. Make them big Amazons and into a harem for me. I have the power to handle 20 demigod wives.
God damn it. Just imagine this is a dumb slice of life anime. You go to work as a salaryman just to come home to 18 plus demigod wives. Daily fighting for your attention and affection. Each day they rotate tests of skill to see who gets some alone time. This is an incredibly degenerate thought exercise, and I can imagine it gets so much worse. I hope you're happy with yourself, Umbral. It's terrible.
Slice of life? Is this more Conrad talk, or more Foul-Tau Anne E. May that I have heard so many horrible things about? Clearly Promethium won't do. A cyclonic torpedo is the only answer. While I wait for the holy rites to be initiated, let's move on to Isaiah Alcindor's comment. I feel like the beginning of this video misunderstood Pertutabo's character. Like the event of him destroying his planet. He didn't think the Emperor would be mad. He knew he wouldn't care, and that's what pushed him over the edge. He just wanted someone to care and love him.
You know, I'm not sure where you're getting that idea. I can't recall a single piece that points to that. However, I can point to pieces that reinforce his feelings about the Emperor. That being said, my opinion on it has shifted since I made that video. I think the Emperor is less of a factor than his own crippling feelings of shame. Let me explain. This passage here takes place after he was forced to face reality by his sister and killed her for it. He looks out to see the bloody work that he ordered. He's traumatized by it. Not due to the bloodshed, but by the utter shame it caused him, as he's supposed to be this world's protector. He is, for all practical purposes, the king of his little fiefdom, and he destroyed it instead of leading it properly. The last paragraph here, "The Emperor will never forgive us for this," he whispered to himself. "The Emperor will never forgive us. The Emperor cannot forgive us, ever." He repeated this over and over again, like he was a neophyte given a secret chance of the Legion for the first time. Perturabo had found a new, unbreakable litany. This is a callback to Chapter 8, where the Iron Warrior Adantioch is whispering to his battle brother Zolan as he's dying from old age due to their horrible fight with time-warping Hrud. Their unbreakable litany. From iron cometh strength, from strength cometh will, from will cometh faith, from faith cometh honor, from honor cometh iron. This was their underlying philosophy. This new unbreakable litany is showing that the Iron Warrior's base philosophy, from the Primarch all the way down, is motivated by this shameful act, from which they can never, ever repent. Does it mean the Emperor himself could not actually forgive it? Obviously not. But this is the crossing the Rubicon for Pert. Like Stannis Baratheon in A Song of Ice and Fire, he broke before he bent. And for someone driven primarily by their ego, as he is in the Hammer of Olympia, it is far easier to be wholly self-destructive in your sorrow than deal with the shame and embarrassment.
Now that was a nice change of pace. I bet the next, what in the Emperor's golden dusty ass clouds? Who would willingly name themselves Alpha Omegon? What the f did you just say, you worthless heretic? I'll have you know I graduated top of my class in the Iron Hands, and I've led an incomprehensible number of secret raids against the forces of chaos. And I have over 30 minutes. The real point is, maybe if the Emperor communicated better with his sons, nothing would have happened.
You know, this is a problem many dads face. Dad workshop time is for after the kids go to bed. You can't neglect them to make your own custom Berserk Guts Commander deck, and you can't neglect them to go and explore the webway. First, you gotta brush their teeth, tuck them into bed, pat them on their little implants in their head, and then go work on your own stuff and show up the Eldar. Seriously, though, I wonder how bad it would have been if he just spent time with them. So let's assume for this hypothetical that in the main timeline, he and Malky actually used the tarot, saw the future, and knew that half of his sons were going to betray him. After a certain point, I think he had an idea of which sons were going to fall on which side, so, that would explain why he really just didn't try with half of them. So, since the Great Crusade was chugging along with his most trusted and loved son at its head, he thought he'd be able to run home as quickly as he could, finish the webway, give humanity the advantage, right? Horus would be able to hold off the betrayers for long enough for him to be able to go and counterattack and subdue the ones who he generally knew were going to betray him. Obviously, that didn't go as planned, but what if he didn't do that, and instead took a longer route where he spent more time with each of his sons, helping them as best he could with all of their issues? I think a reason why the Emperor rushed in the Great Crusade to go get all of his sons as quickly as possible was so that he could at least draft and pick and choose which ones he thought would be best suited to help him protect himself against the others. I think that would explain why he didn't do what I proposed, and didn't give everybody as much time as he did with Horus and Russ. Because he built really, really deep loyalty between those two. But if he did that with all of his sons, I could see Tzeentch really messing with the warp enough to really make it incredibly one-sided. Imagine if on Chaos's side, where the Emperor didn't go far enough or quickly enough to get everybody. You have Horus the Lion, Sanguinius, Guilliman, Russ, Magnus, Perturabo, Alfarius, and let's say Dorn. What is, let's be real, not throwing shade to anybody, but what is Ferris, Vulcan, Jagatai, Corvus, Fulgrim, Lorgar, Mortarion, Conrad, and Angron? I mean, they're all, those are great, don't get me wrong, but who's going to unify them? I mean, do you really think they're all going to go underneath Lorgar? Really? I mean, they can all be chaotic, but come on. Under the logistic might of Perturabo and Guilliman, under the sheer force of will in single combat between the Lion, Sanguinius, and Horus, at best you get Fulgrim rise to the occasion, but he can only supplement so much. I think this, I don't think I'm confusing fanfiction here, I could be, but I think this is backed up by the actual lore, in that, if you see, I think the Emperor really wanted to get Fulgrim on his side for the end, and it would make sense considering all the affection he gave him the Aquila to wear when nobody else could, and him and Malcador really thought Jagatai Khan was going to turn. So that those two would totally make sense if they were, on opposite sides at the end. As I said before, it would really explain why he gave up on the Broken Ones, like Angron, the Broken Brain Crews, and Poison Huffing Mort. He did the bare minimum. He didn't really expect for any of them to last, and he knew he was going to have to kill them anyway.
Mortarion, Angron, and Curzy probably still would have started shit, but would have caused less damage, I think.
True, but if Malcador and the Emperor are doing as I said before, and playing for time, they may have collected all the pieces they needed already. I'll elaborate on that in a second, but let's look at the official timeline from the Exploring the Galaxy on the HorusHeresy.com. So the timeline goes, in terms of the ones that they picked up, was Horus, Russ, Redacted, Ferris, Fulgrim, Vulcan, Dorn, G-Man, Magnus, Sanguinius, the Lion, Pert, Mort, Logar, Jagatai Khan, Conrad, Angron, Corvus, Redacted number 2, Alfarius, and Omegon. Seeing it like this actually lends my off-the-cuff mad ramblings a bit of credence. We have our own big bro leader, Horus, Rager, Russ, our Redacted, our Meccano Man in Ferris, our all-rounder, Fulgrim, all before we get to our first potential overlap. Vulcan is the next one. He's a Meccano Man too, but he's more of an artisan. He doesn't feel like the things he makes are for an industrial scale, just for his legion and maybe a couple other guys. So he spends a lot of time with all of the Primarchs, although he doesn't dote on Fulgrim until the Proximum Betrayal. If that's near the end of finding all the Primarchs, that goes against my theory totally. However, if it's anywhere before finding Robute Guilliman, I think it works. Because at that point, he has his all-rounder, which he totally cares about. He gives him the Aquila, which really makes Fulgrim just, fall in love with the guy way more than, he already is genetically inclined to do. Then he finds his first defense specialist in Dorn, followed by his second generalist in Robute Guilliman. In keeping with my theory, it would also illuminate some of the side-eyeing sent Guilliman's way. It would also explain some of the instinctual distrust a lot of the other brothers have from the beginning, especially the ones who were there with the Emperor first. Some of it might be pride, but some of it might be subconscious signals the Emperor sent to be like, hey, watch out for this guy. He might betray us because this is the one thing that the Emperor is looking out for. Continuing on, we have our party's main magic man, Magnus. The Emperor kept him by his side because he is pretty unique amongst his brothers. He's followed by Sanguinius. Sanguinius. It's just so many things. He's so unique that I'm not really sure where he fits. He's charismatic, he's a berserker, he's intelligent, he can see the future, he's an icon. He's the perfect betrayer. Anyway, he's got a special place in the Emperor's heart in the main timeline. He's a special boy. He always wants him by his side. Anyway, moving on to the Lion, big bro leader number 2. Very upset, growing up on a chaos world. This one's a little weird to me. Now, he's like a specialist generalist who the Emperor trusts with his most dirty deeds, his darkest technologies. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with him because I can't... it seems that the Emperor didn't imagine him betraying, period. So there's also this other theory about Horus being put up as a sacrificial cow, but that doesn't really square with how he's treated him. So I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, after the Lion, we have our Defender number 2 and our Meccano guy number 3 in Perturabo. No wonder he gets shafted. He's redundancy on top of redundancy, and he's already a little broken from hanging out with so many, toxic Greeks all day. Then, after him, we have Mortarion, who's our siege specialist, number 1 and our tough guy number 3. I can't imagine a world in which he drafts Mortarion, despite his incredible aesthetic. But his aesthetic is so... Listen, the Emperor, if he knows anything, he understands aesthetic. And his aesthetic is that of a betrayer, of an angel of death. Mortarion feels like he was always going to be betrayed. I'm sorry. See, you got a Freudian slip there. I meant to betray her, but yeah, you get it. I mean... Can you imagine, even if Mortarion was one of the first 2 selected, that he would be one of the people that the Emperor would choose for his side? I mean, I feel like he would have to because he has the most time with him, but his aesthetic isn't great. He's, for being a good guy next to a golden shining god, how is he going to really pull that back? Who knows? Moving on from Mortarion, we have our 3rd or 4th charisma guy and our 2nd magic man if we're counting Lorgar's psychic might. Now see, I'm not entirely sure why the Emperor let Mr. Propaganda Guy out from under his thumb. Maybe he thought he had enough time, before he can really infect everything else, or maybe he was worried that if he spent too much time with him, he would either infect those loyal to him, making the shift further off of a 9v9, or he thought that he would be trading in the runt of the litter for somebody far more capable, like the Lion or something. Who can say, besides me and later ramblings? Next is our first Ranger, one-of-a-kind guy. And while he is unique insofar as his unrivaled scouting, at worst he could bleed the Imperium pretty bad, but never so much that they would truly fall, at least from the way I see it. I can see why he would definitely be traded in for, let's say, the Lion, who may not be an S tier at what Jagatai does, he's an A tier and everything. So with his, I think it was a Deathwing, his real fast, knights, I think, they could put up well enough of a fight to really hurt Jagatai. Now by this time we're getting to the really broken ones. Conrad is seriously unwell. The Emp sees it. They spend a little bit of time together. You know, he's a first assassin specialist, so he's got to keep him close. But I have to imagine this is really worrying the Emps, because he's the first, you know, he's got like 3 killers, like silent killers, and if they're anywhere near as bad as Conrad, he's sweating. Then we have our second or third berserker at this point, and, you know, I think we could all understand why he wrote off Angron. His brain is absolutely borked, and, you know, quite frankly... If he's writing him off because he already has all the berserkers he needs, how do we know he actually couldn't get the nails out of his head? I mean, he's the Emperor. He's a scientist. He can go back in time. He can do all sorts of mad stuff. He may have thought that the nails may have broken one of the tools of the enemy, so he left them all messed up. That is heretical. That is a heretical thought. But, you know, just kicking these ideas around. Next up is Corvus, and he must have a heavy sigh of relief. Not only is this special shadow assassin boy not corrupted, this Conan the Barbarian looking mother effer is a scientific mind like his own. No wonder he gave him the keys to his lab after Istvan. It's probably like a dad of 5 getting a divorce. He's so happy that one of them didn't knock up a girl or get on drugs that he's happy to give him the keys to his jag or his workshop. His trust is there because at least he didn't mess up that bad. Finally, redundant redacted number 2, and Alpha Omegon. Whether he got them first or last, who knows, and really who cares, because he's got Corvus and the Custodes. Joke's on him, I guess. I mean, look at the jag smashed into the workshop now. The youngest just wanted attention, I think.
That took a minute. You could have made that into its own video. Enough living in the past. We need new, fresh ideas, like the ones False Hero 2001 has for us. What people misunderstand about how Perturabo's Primarch power works, including Perturabo himself, is that he can look an object and understand how it works. That's not entirely true. In reality, Perturabo can look in an object and instinctively understand how it breaks. You can glean some insight on how something works by breaking it down and finding its faults, but not everything. The statue story is a clear example. Perturabo knows how to make a statue on a technical level, but his gift doesn't allow him to understand what the statue needs to be on an artistic level. He didn't consider that imperfection would make something better.
That's an interesting take on his powers. Although, I don't think his other characterizations of him building art on at least 2 occasions in Hammer of Olympia and Angel Exterminatus bear that out. In the depiction you cite where he's in a competition against Andos, where he's already admittedly a bit of a huge dick, I think he made it just perfect because it was technically perfect and couldn't be handcrafted and made by a mortal. I think his sole motivation in that story was just to flex on his brother to satiate his ego. If he gave a shit about the piece like he did when he drew on his own with passion, I bet he could come up with a stunning piece.
Consider the lessons he teaches. I quote this because, is he really being a teacher in these instances, or is he being a critic? What do all of the example lessons have in common? Him telling his student what they are doing wrong. He's pointing out their faults and mistakes. He's berating them on their weakness, but not offering a way to better themselves. All he seems to be able to do is yell at them to stop.
You know, I don't think that this is necessarily true. In Angel Exterminatus, Pert asks Fulgrim what he learned from wasting his ships first, instead of berating him. This is a sign of a great teacher, one who's more interested in growth than punishment. Later, he looks into his eyes to see if there's anything, any remorse at all, that he could use and to reach to his brother, brother to brother. Same with Magnus later. Sure, he breaks his toy, but he's trying to instill in him that he needs to put aside his ego and trust the greater wisdom of his father.
I imagine it must be maddening for Perturabo. Imagine going through life being able to see everything wrong with everyone around you, having their worst aspects amplified whenever you look at them. No wonder he became bitter and frustrated. The irony is that the one person he couldn't or wouldn't analyze is himself. In truth, his sin is not pride, but sloth. He is lazy, relying on his supernatural gifts rather than improving himself. When he sees that the snake is too difficult to fight, he gives up. When making a better statue is too hard, he gives up. When the siege of Terra starts going poorly, he give up. You say he's a good person, but he's not. He's a problem solver. He helps people, but only when it is easy.
While I agree with the beginning about him seeing all the different flaws in other people, I really just absolutely detest this characterization. I just don't think it fits. But I'll be honest, you put in a lot of effort and thought into this that I thought it would be a shame to not showcase it. Because I really appreciate the time you spent in writing the comment and putting out your ideas there, and you and everybody else who, took the time to write. Even if I didn't showcase your stuff, I still saw a bunch of other good comments as I'm building this and right before I'm about to record. So I want to say thank you, even though we might disagree. Switching gears back to your point. Between the snake and the Siege of Terra, all it shows is that he's not suicidal, and he weighs his options. To call it sloth, you have to ignore the entirety of his battle tactics, which is siege. Literally sticking it out when things get tough, the opposite of sloth.
Ironically, the thing that made him the most angry, getting assigned tasks that he saw as beneath him, were likely seen as being judged so because they were easy. Specifically, they were easy for him because they were exactly the kind of problems he was created to tackle. It's hypocritical. He wants the glory, but he doesn't want to be challenged.
Alright, so my reading comprehension must be failing me, because I can't seem to quite make sense of the logic here. So, mad equals assigned tasks that he sees beneath him. Beneath him equals they're seen as easy. He must tackle them equals it makes them easy. He wants glory but doesn't want to be challenged. It doesn't. You say he doesn't want to be challenged, but he's also mad because it's easy. If I'm just a room temp IQ here, please let me know in the comments, because I wouldn't be surprised. But to me, it just doesn't. It's contradictory.
I see a consistent character throughout all the examples, a man who sees himself as the smartest man in the room because he usually is, and needs this fact validated constantly. As long as he believes himself to be in control, he's able to remain calm. As soon as his agency starts to slip from him, he reacts with violence.
Now, this I think I agree with for a different reason. I don't think it comes from a sense that he needs to be right or he's unable to deal with criticism, but by the way he was raised and the mortals he was raised with. He would debate Olympians all the time and stomp them, but after a certain point, it becomes old hat and people no longer listen to reason. I'd imagine after he conquered the planet, he learned that you can get through mortals easily enough by overwhelming force. I can't imagine he'd act with Magnus, Vulcan, or Ferris that way. It seems like he'd only treated Fulgrim with violence because he was doped out of his mind and wasn't a logical actor.
Because Perturabo does not know how to build, only break down. This goes equally for his relationship with others. He doesn't elevate his legion. He purges them. He doesn't teach them to better themselves, only focus on what they're good at. He is evil, and evil cannot create anything new. They can only corrupt and ruin what good forces have invented or made.
Now this is totally incongruous with stories like Perturabo, Stone and Iron, where the entire point of the story was trying to get his sons to realize that they're not the be-all end-all, and that other legions, even the Imperial Fists, have virtues that they can learn and grow from. This may have been better for after the entirety of this comment, but this section goes to show just how contradictory and rough all of these different depictions of Perturabo is. And replying to this comment makes me sad, because it feels like I'm cheating almost, in that you have made False Hero 2001 a consistent character that totally makes sense. I think it's a good depiction of a bad guy and a real jerk, and I think that a lot of the things you point out, if we can pick and choose certain things, you can definitely make that character. And I do the same, or at least when I make a character and I think of Perturabo in my head, when I come up with my fanfiction, sort of what I want him to be, I pick all of the parts that make him into this kind of paragon, this flawed paragon, and I ignore all of the chaff that's incongruous with that. But you didn't do this. You didn't make him all jacked up. It's just kind of the hand we're dealt. And I think that, yeah, no, I just, even if this whole comment I disagree with, I think that a lot of it's not your fault. And I don't have any, I'm not trying to be a jerk.
Consider the story of the feathered serpent. What would any of the other Primarchs have done had they landed on Olympia instead of Perturabo? I think that all of them would have tried to save the kid in their own ways, even Lorgar. But Perturabo didn't. It was too hard and not worth it for him. And that speaks volumes about who he really is.
I think the fact that the biggest computer brain in the galaxy took over a minute to decide to engage in a fight that he knew he couldn't win spoke pretty highly of his character. Instead of the vice of sloth, I thought it showcased the virtue of prudence, even in the worst-case scenario. Think about it, there are few things worse than watching a child/young man slowly die, especially when every fiber of your being is screaming at you to move and help. But he understood that he's no help to anybody maimed or dead. That kind of stone-cold will is exactly the type of man the Emperor needed by his side. Now, while I wanted to dismiss this comment as a resentful survivor of the Iron Cage, the chance that this was an earnest disagreement of his character held me back. For the second time, I want to say thank you for leaving it. I always love hearing, disagreeing viewpoints, even if I vehemently disagree. It makes me happy. Clearly, obviously, I like to dig into minutia and argue with people because I'm a weirdo, but thank you. Thank you again.
I don't know, CO. That made sense to me. Maybe you're a bit closer to a servitor than a dreadnought, if you catch my drift. At least Adrian Miskiewicz's comment is inarguably good. You couldn't possibly drag this one out. I imagine that rewritten Perturabo's post-heresy goal would be collecting shards of Magnus to make him again whole.
Oh yeah! I would think that Pert, if he ever found out about it, would send a dark crusade to gather them all, killing Imperials and Chaos alike to get at them. I can imagine him sending a lot of AI bots to the Moon Titan to retrieve the fragments there. Imagine him meeting Magnus, sent by Tzeentch to stop him, and Perturabo looking at him with pity and disgust. Only a shell of his former self, and using his own variant of Necron pariahs to fight the warp spawn. It would make one hell of a story. Oh my god, imagine him trying to actually get to Titan. It'd be so weird, the Grey Knights and Tzeentch on the same side for once, both of them trying to stop Perturabo from getting the last shard of Magnus. I mean, imagine, once collected, I can see a new split factions of renegades emerging, the Pert and Magnus faction. That kind of alternate universe, that calls for a different video and a different story, but maybe we can do that sometime if there's interest.
Another AU? CEO! With what time? Let's not pretend I haven't seen that directory full of Lorgar books. It took you how long to make this? We'll see more Tyrannid content from Games Workshop before we see that video. Speaking of, Nawan, 422 has some pretty interesting ideas about the Nids. Every one of them has something about them that's interesting, but Pert is so unique in that we don't know anything. His story starts on top of a mountain with no memory of how he got there. We know what happened with Kurzi, we know what happened with Angren. We even know somewhat what happened with Alfarius. Parabo is a mystery, and you filled in that mystery extremely well. I'm a Tyrannid fan right now, but I always say my favorite Primarch is Jagatai Khan. But if I had to be chaotic, I pick Perturabo. This has made me want to just up front say I'm a Perturabo fan, and I'm proud.
So I asked Norman what cool stuff he thought he could do with the Nids, and this is what he said.
I thought it would be cool if they allowed Tyrannids and Genestealer cults to coexist in hive ships. It could lead to interfleet holy wars or even Tyrannid champions where a cultist has merged with a bioform to the point where they practically are one. It could really add to the Lovecraftian aesthetic that gets dropped in favor of the xenomorph dynamic.
So truth be told, I always hated the suggestion of the end result of Gene Stealers being anything other than an ironic slaughter for them. Now that being said, I really like your aesthetic idea. I understand the want to give the Gene Stealers something, anything, beyond the conquering of a single world. While, if given the final say, I'd probably keep it how it is. I think it's a proper punishment for the kind of betrayal and hubris they have for sacrificing their friends and family. Although I definitely understand the urge to want to give them something. For the sake of argument, let's play off of your idea for a minute. Maybe if the Gene Stealer cult was super effective on an especially defensive world, let's say Necromunda or something, and it was all due to a level of intuitive, sort of weird gene mutation that just made them really quick on their feet. At that point, I could see the Nids wanting to do something with all of those genes and not necessarily, ripping them to shreds and then using them in that way. Maybe in the same way that they're not usually eaten until the fleet gets a strong enough position on the world that they're no longer useful. The hive mind could read their minds, see their actions, and judge how they'd be most useful. If they were a special case, they would not just eat the leader like usual, but absorb them and make use of their DNA in another way. This might also lead into their propaganda and sort of religion that they have, It gets the fanatical cult members to be like, hey, you got to try extra hard because on that day of revelation when the mother ship god monster comes down, you don't want to be absorbed, you want to be a special boy, right? Maybe let them walk into flesh walls in the Hive fleet and emerge like an avatar of Cain, a new perpetual champion like Old One-Eye. That would give the Tyranids some level of personality and character that they're so currently desperate for and lack, and allow for a holy war, as you said. You can get some inter-Hive fleet competition here where you have sub-factions fighting each other to see whose genes are the best, and then they absorb and adapt the most frustrating parts of those that they conquer. You could have figureheads who range from like Shieldred and Kerrigan, who are these more humanoid parts that are connected to a giant, non-beast flesh machine, to giant bestial creatures like Vorinclex or something that are closer to more Old One-Eye, just giant Tyranid monsters. Those would be more of the intuition specialist sort of things.
There's always talk about saving the best for last, but it's an honest shame that CO stuffed this at the very end. Cool things need to be celebrated, especially things created by Nobre Plebeu. It's good that someone else picked on the teacher aspect of Perturabo. I tried to put it in perspective in the Codex Olympia Majoris, where he managed to bound with a mortal on Olympia that seeks him out as a mentor. If you may, give a look into the Codex. I tried to make it akin to the old Forge World books. Feels to it, to go the extra mile.
When I saw this comment, I nearly lost my shit. A little backstory here, it's going to be a little bit more rambly. When I was writing the Understanding and Rewriting Perturabo, I was looking for a ton of pictures. As you saw, I had a bunch of nonsense. I stumbled upon this incredible Space Battles post, and Space Battles is a old school sort of forum for any of boomers and ancient people who used to work, go on old internets, just IRC chats, telegraphs, smoke signals, just old school tech. I saw this incredible post, and I thought somebody had scanned the images of a codex I've never seen before. And I was looking through it, and it looked like there was custom images and all sorts of detailed thing, and I was only skimming it, and it kind of blew my mind, just how good it was. And so when I saw this, I kind of gushed in a really, really awkward way. It was so cool. Here's a confession, however. I haven't actually read it yet. Now, a little explanation. If I'm writing something about a certain topic, I don't like to read other people's stuff about it in that moment, because I don't want to be so heavily involved that I'm writing something for their universe, especially something where I'm already writing a 40k thing in somebody else's universe. I at least want to kind of make it my own thing. And so if I feel like if I read somebody else's alternate universe sort of take on it, I would probably get cross-contaminated in my brain with all of their cool homebrew ideas for it. So, that's no real excuse at the time of recording this that I haven't read it, because I finished the story now. It's been a little bit. But yeah, I've, life, a lot of things to do, a lot of reading. However, I really want to read it on the channel, so I might live stream it or something. I might do a recording and get to gush on it there and show everybody the cool art. I've probably been showing images of it through this thing, but please, I'm going to put a link to the actual codex in the description, and I'm going to put a link to Nobre's YouTube channel right here. Look at it. There you go. There's the link, description. Bop, bop, bop. Go check him out because it's great work. And that's all the comments I could cover for this video. It's gone way too long. I should probably have this done before the commission for the other work is done. Editing CEO here. This video's taken so long that the commission's done tomorrow, I think. So expect Perturabo, Weight of Olympia, to come out in about a week or so. So look forward to that. Subscribe, do all that nonsense. I hate saying it, but I think it helps. So yeah, bye, back to the end of the other video. So if I didn't cover your comment, trust me, it's not because it wasn't good enough. I just literally don't have enough time to actually put this out. But thank you again to everybody who took the time to comment and share cool ideas with me. I really appreciate it. You guys have no idea, but it's been a lot of fun. I hope you like more of my sort of deranged ramblings, and if you do, let me know and I'll post more. You guys have a good one. Until next time, see you.